This is The Bottom Line. The Bottom Line on 938 Live.
Business spending is expected to be higher at this year's Formula One Singapore Grand Prix, according to the chief executive at Spire Research, Leon Pereira. And Singapore Airlines, which was revealed as the title sponsor yesterday, is set to benefit. 938 Live's Travis Teo spoke to Mr. Pereira and started by asking what some of these tangible and non-tangible benefits are.
Well, Travis, the tangible benefit, of course, is in terms of providing travel. So Singapore Airlines, of course, being a carrier, is in a position to offer co-branded travel packages to inbound visitors, and of course there's a good deal of business entertainment that goes on at the F1 event, so a lot of people fly in for that. So SIA would be in a position to offer co-branded travel, perhaps travel packages with certain fringe benefits, and that would be a commercial driver for them. And the intangible benefit to SIA is as interesting as well, I think, which is that the F1 is a sport that tends to appeal quite strongly to business people. There's a strong element of business entertainment, and SIA as an airline is a very strong performer in the business and first class segment, and they tend to rely quite strongly on that for their profit performance. So I think the target audience here is very much well aligned. So that's a very good intangible brand benefit for SIA.
Right, I see. And if you talk about some of these business entertainment, do you think this year with SIA being the title sponsor, it might just give that much needed boost?
I would expect it to see some improvement over last year just on the basis of global economics. The economic environment globally is improving a little, and particularly in Europe, where F1 has a very high brand equity and very high recall. Many of the European countries are turning the corner economically, and the American economy is also improving this year compared to last year. So I think both from the North American and European side, we should expect some improvement in terms of the business performance and levels of inbound visitors to the event.
And Leon, are there any downside to such a sponsorship though?
For the F1 sponsorship, I wouldn't really see any downsides. The only downside would be the cost, of course. So it's an investment, and a company that's sponsoring obviously has to make sure there's a good return on that investment. So the F1 is not a sporting event that is unpopular among certain segments of the population, really. So there's no other downside other than the cost.
Right. I see. And so how much do you think SIA paid to be the title sponsor? And do you think there's a risk of overpaying?
Well, that's of course a good question. I don't have any specific information on how much they paid. It's clearly in the millions, but I can't really put a figure on that. However, I think with these kinds of sponsorship deals, of course, there's always a risk. But, actually within the whole field of sponsorship, there are increasingly sophisticated processes and tools to measure ROI and forecast ROI, that's return on investment. I think this is being done in a more and more rigorous fashion. So I'm sure for Singapore Airlines, which has a huge marketing budget, they have pretty sophisticated processes to try and measure and forecast the ROI over the 2 years. But having said that, there is always a risk, especially if you're in a situation where it is a competitive process. There's always a risk that you overpay slightly.
Right, and F1 said that they reached out to SIA for this sponsorship. So why do you think they are moving away from Singtel?
Well, I'm sure it would have been a business decision. I mean, Bernie Ecclestone is a hard-nosed businessman, and he's been very successful driving the F1 so far. I suppose from the F1 perspective, they look at the universe of brands out there whose brand values are synchronous with F1, and then they just look at who's willing to invest more. So it's a fairly straightforward kind of commercial calculation on their part.